Alright dudes, welcome to my guide of how to shred the Tryweryn. Things to know before we get into this. Number 1, the Tryweryn is a fast, shallow river, and trying some of these more advanced moves may cause you to flip, and that puts you at risk of hitting rocks with your head, which is not ideal. So remember that you're trying these moves at your own risk. You're only going to do them if you feel confident doing them, and if you do them, just be ready to snap a roll up and fix things so you can avoid any scary rocks going near your head. And I think that's about it. Let's get into it. Move number 1, the rock spin at the top of the lower graveyard. I would say that this is the most high profile trick on the entire river. It's the one that everyone sees and everyone dreams of hitting one day. What puts a lot of people off is that it's right at the top of the steepest and longest section of the river, and if you were to get it wrong, well, that would just suck. But if you look at the rock again, you're going to see that it's a pretty perfect setup for this trick, and it is just begging to be 360'd. As with all rock tricks, we've got to decide how fast we're going to hit it. With this rock, we can see clearly that the water is flowing up it really nicely, and that gives us a clear indicator of how fast we're going to go in the lead up to this trick. And we're going to go just a little bit faster than the water, and that's going to put us perfectly on that middle part of the rock where it dries out, which is the ideal spot to do our rock spin. This is a pretty big rock, and we're going to split it into 2 halves. On the left hand side, you can see that there's almost no drop off into the water, and the water it does land back into is moving relatively slowly. If you look at the right hand side, you'll see that there's at least half a foot of drop off, if not a foot, and it also lands into the fastest part of the current. And what that tells us is that the sickest rock spin is going to be on our right, but that's going to give us the most airtime, and it's going to cause us to land the hardest onto our edge in the fastest water, and that's going to create the most difficulties for us to set up for the rest of the rapid. If you look at the left hand side, you'll see that we're going to get a pretty good rock spin here. It's not going to be as hyphy, but it's going to set us up much better for the next sequence of moves. And so it's really just up to you of what you feel confident hitting and what you want to do in the rest of the rapid. I'm not going to talk too much about how to do a rock spin because we're going to do a whole tutorial on that in the coming weeks, but primarily you want to get up on top of the rock. You're going to take a big reverse sweep stroke. You're going to look over your shoulder once you've done the 180, and you're going to spot where you're going to fall off the rock and be ready to take your next stroke. Just quickly here, because I know a few people find this confusing because obviously the kayak is way bigger than the rock, but the part that I'm talking about hitting the rock with is that center point of the kayak where all of my weight is directly underneath the seat. And this part of the kayak is actually going to provide the axis for us to spin off and do the trick. And we'll cover way more of this in the official how to rock spin tutorial in the next week or so. But for now, just look where that part of my kayak, where my body is hitting the rock. Move number 2, the Everest rock booth. This is an amazing move, and it's not actually that hard to do, and as a bonus, it's right at the bottom of the lower graveyard rapid, and you've got some flat below that, so it's not actually that consequential. Not too much to talk about here with specific technique, but we're going to hit the move really fast. We're going to hit the left-hand side of the rock while taking a left booth stroke off it, and we're going to lift our right knee just a little bit to match the angle of the rock, and that's going to enable us to climb up and over it and to have a smooth transition over to the side of it. Whereas if we were to hit it flat, then the whole hull of the kayak would be present, and then we would risk ricocheting off it really violently. So that's my top tips for that move. The ski slope eddy. This is a pretty high pressure move, right? Because if you mess it up, then you're going to fall backwards into probably the gnarliest hole on the river. And it's definitely intimidating to hit for your first time. And unfortunately, I just figured out how to kickflip off the wave there that guards the eddy. So I don't have any clips of me catching the eddy because I'm more stoked on the kickflip. But super cool. I captured this video of a young shredder grabbing the eddy, and he did a pretty good job of it, so we'll use him as an example. Key things when you're going for this line that I see a lot of people do wrong. A lot of people go from a river right eddy above it, but this doesn't set you up with any lateral motion to actually get into the eddy, and it also puts you straight in all the fast water. So you've got to ditch all that speed before you even go for the eddy, and you have no lateral momentum to like ping you into the side of the eddy. You're going really fast on the right hand side, and you're trying to make this tiny little turn on the right hand side. It's just it just makes it so much harder than it has to be. So instead of that, we're gonna go from the left hand side, and we're going to go really late into this move. We're going to take a big sweep stroke. You can take a righty one like a slalomer would, or you can take a big lefty. It doesn't matter. But the key thing here is to start turning before your nose hits the eddy. It's a really small eddy with a tiny eddy line, so you don't have to cross over an eddy line particularly. What you have to do is match your kayak to the shape of the eddy. So we're going to come across really late, we're going to take a big sweep stroke, and then we're going to start snapping the nose of our kayak around to the right before we even get close to the eddy. And then our nose will catch the slow water in the eddy, our tail will still be in the fast water, and we'll just swing in and slot in nicely. And just like that, congratulations, you just crushed one of the scarier lines on the river. And then from here, you can surf out over this beautiful green wave, and then that sets you up perfectly for the final move, which is either avoiding the hole or booth in the middle of it. But either way, you've got a bunch of speed from here, you'll be forwards and you will come through the hole fine. The Miss Davies Bridge Eddy. This is, when I was a kid growing up, there was one person that would go for this one, and that was Matt Cook, all-round whitewater ninja, Tryweryn legend, been there for years. And it just seemed crazy because it's such a small eddy and such a fast location, and it's just a hard move to hit. But recently, every time I've been back there, there's been more and more people going it, which is really cool to see, you know? And I guess it's just the natural order of things that people are going to want to progress, and there's going to be more people trying the harder line. So super cool to see. One word of warning about this move before I talk you through how to do it. There have been a few people recently get pinned in a gap on the rocks on the right hand side, including one of my friends when I was last there, and my friend will remain anonymous. Tom Clapp. Sorry, Tom. I actually see that as being easy to do. If you hit it with a lot of speed, then you're going to hit the lower half of the eddy where that gap between the rocks are, and you're going to hit it with a lot of speed. So you're just going to nail through that gap in the rocks, and you're going to be stuck in a horrible place, which we don't want. So to hit this line properly, we're going to set up switch with our nose pointing upstream, and we're going to be positioned just above the eddy on the other side of the river. And the key thing we're trying to do here is ferry glide over. We're not trying to get any downstream momentum at all. We're just trying to slide out into the fast water, cross over, and just dip into that eddy. And that is by far the smoothest way to get into that eddy. When you're in there, there's a couple of rocks on the left-hand side, which I find it really hard not to take the temptation to grab just to stop yourself completely, because the eddy isn't that solid, you know. It's still like flowing downstream slightly because you're right on the lip of Miss Davies Bridge. So I personally, sometimes I've managed to avoid it, but I struggle to resist that temptation. I normally end up just grabbing one of those rocks on the left just to stop me completely. And then from there, you're in one of the coolest places on the entire river. You know, you're right underneath the bridge, on top of Miss Davies Bridge, which is one of the taller drops on the river. And there's actually a good little green wave to surf, good little hero wave, and you can have a good time on that carving around. And then when you come off it, just turn and burn into that drop. It's a really safe drop. There's eddies below it, there's flat water, everything. Just turn and burn, enjoy it. I like to try and tuck it, but you can do whatever you want off it. Final move that I think most people know of and want to hit but are a little bit intimidated of trying it, and that is the surf at Cathy Wave. So this is right outside the main centre of the Tryweryn. It's right where all the tourists, the rafting clients and your friends will hang out after laps of the river, and so everyone can see you if you mess up, and it can definitely be a little bit off-putting at times, but don't worry about that necessarily. What we want to take into account when we're going for this move is the rapid just below us, the fingers rapid, is really shallow, and we want to make sure that we're coming off the wave in a good position to run that rapid, not upside down on our heads. Key thing when I'm talking about surfing the wave here is I'm going to be referring to things from a surfer's viewpoint. So when you heard me talking about river left and river right before, that's when you're looking down the river, when you're running the river. When I'm talking about surfers left and right, that's from a viewpoint as if you were surfing it, so it's flipped, and that's when you're looking back up the river. And so Cathy Wave now, if we look at it from a surfer's perspective, we have a little bit of a hole on the left, we have the main wave in the middle of the river, and we have another hole on the right, which is actually quite trashy. And so what we're trying to surf is that middle V part, which is the nicest wave. It's going to give us the best surf and the most fun for doing all sorts of tricks. We're going to climb up the eddy until we're perfectly parallel with the main wave, and then we're just going to slide out onto the main wave. And here's a big thing: if this is your first surf on Cathy Wave, you're going to surf with your nose pointing just a little bit back to the left, and that is going to enable us to not surf straight into the hole on River Right and get a little bit trashed. And it's also going to set us up in the best way to stay on the main face of the wave, which is really nice to surf. And it also sets us up perfectly to catch the eddy afterwards, or to turn and come round the corner. Despite the wave being shallow, it is an absolute joy because it's so fast. And for most people, this is going to be their first time experiencing the kayak get up to planing speed and just feeling how free and how lively the kayak is once it's going that fast. And for me, I remember that feeling in particular, and it's what got me hooked on freestyle kayaking. Alright, that's it. That's my top 5 moves on the Tryweryn. Thank you so much for the suggestions and the encouragement to make this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and the best of luck with hitting these lines. Let me know if any of you hit these lines and if this video helped you. And if you have any other lines that you want to see and get advice from, comment below, because maybe we'll make another one of these videos, because the list goes on. It's endless. There's so many sick moves out there. Have a sick summer, and I'll see you guys on the water.